Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons, an interactive role-playing series where the decisions you make as your character affects the story in ways you won't know until it's showtime. While we roleplay, we also world build, and so your creations become story elements and pivotal plot devices. If you enjoy role-playing and have a character to bring into our setting, we encourage you to join the show. Otherwise, feel free to spectate, like, and subscribe. Haven City. More than a city. More than we can know. The Tank, a colossal computer the size of a star that acts as an incubator for an artificial planet. An artificial planet inhabited by abominations born of science and dark magic. Abominations that overcame their conditions, overpowered their overlord oppressors, and broke the cycle to change their destiny. They were the Gamma types. Mutants in nature, but also living beings who evolved within isolated confines of their own perceived reality. It wouldn't be until contact is made with an outside entity that inhabitants of the Tank begin to realize the value of life and the scope of their existence. Drifting through space, the Tank is hauled through the star system in search of civilization and/or resources by a space diplomat named Mistress Scorn, a trader of information and an opportunist. Scorn discovers a nearby prospect, Anvil Station, a settlement that served as a checkpoint for intergalactic travelers on the move to and fro, has become home to displaced amnesiacs from all corners of existence, whose life paths led them there by way of a spatial tear that formed nearby. This spatial tear began to devour and regurgitate anything that would find itself on the edge of proximity. This in turn made it impossible for resources or help to reach the station, rendering its inhabitants, whom were already lost and forgotten, doomed. That is, until Mistress Scorn crosses paths with what the Anvil Colony is in search of and what they need the most: a home. Scorn, being the diplomat she is, spins a deal with the mayor of Anvil and offers them refuge on the artificial planet in exchange for full access to the depleted space station. She informs the mayor of what he's getting into, but ensures him that there are benevolent forces at work inside of the Tank with sufficient control. With a little diplomacy, they could reach an understanding. And though it wasn't always so, it is very true today. She smiles. The mayor arranges a landing inside of the Tank, with hopes of negotiating his colony's living arrangements, if any. Time has since passed since the stranger's arrival, and there has been some turbulence, but not like we would have expected. Haven is fractured in more ways than one. The addition of new civilization couldn't have happened at a worse time. Or was it the perfect time? That's for all of you to decide. How will your actions shape the story? I'm the director. This is Gamma Haven Season 3. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's continue. Months ago, Goth Vailore, a 6'6", 240-pound ex-military agent, peers out into the megalopolis below. It was a sight to behold. Of course it wasn't real, he thinks to himself. Before becoming the mayor of Anvil as a result of a bloody coup that was carried out on the former, once it was discovered they were selling military secrets, Goth Vailore had his fair share of encounters with gamma mutants. Gamma radiation polluted countless star systems. 1 out of every 3 people were green, blue, or had a tentacle. So when the mistress told him that the Tank was filled with them, it was a red flag for sure, but there was no turning back. Nothing to turn back to. Goth couldn't blame Morris and the Wanderers for wanting to jump ship. They were used to the jungles, but guns and sharp objects were predictable, unlike the endless lists of what could kill you in a jungle. Their people needed medical resources ASAP, so Goth chose to land in a city. He chose that for all of the colony, but letting Morris take his friends to the jungle didn't give him too much heartburn. And the life pods should be landing soon. Goth adjusts his holster, then seeks out his closest allies who would join him in on the fun. We cut to Goth standing on the landing pad going over the game plan with two others. Delmon Renarus, a 6'1", 200-pound, suave and sarcastic yet always worried con man from the outer worlds who got caught up in Anvil's bloody coup unfolding while he was there hiding from the law. Long story less long, he owes Mayor Vailore a favor. If they get crafty, Delmon will talk circles around them for sure. He scrolls through the Gamma 2 playlists and sees all the worst parts of Haven culture.
The inhabitants of Haven are like a menagerie of exotic wild animals. Mutations everywhere. Extra eyes, extra arms. In some cases, a little something extra perhaps we wouldn't think about, but hey, the black market here might be a little bit interesting.
The other was a frail gentleman, 5'6", 130-pound, Remus Faulkner, chief medical officer, surgeon, and autonomous. His experience with cybernetics and mutations should come in handy. He can also vouch that they all have their shots. They all agree that they'll keep all the people on the life pods until the three of them smooth things over. They land safely. The doors begin to retract, and the trio walks out slowly, met by an entire Haven force, with guns pointed.
Well now, would you look at that? That is quite a welcoming committee. Sure do know how to make a man feel special.
Haven forces surround all of the Anvil life pods with heavy weapons and artillery. Riflemen set their sights on hearts. Mayor Goth Vailore face palms.
Oh, how lovely, boys. They're painting us in red with their laser sights for the arrival. Apparently Delmon was right again. You earned your pay. Keep your eye on the heavy gunners. If they move, you move. Protect who you can.
The trio begin to walk slowly toward Haven forces with their hands up. Goth Vailore was a large individual, which did not bode well for their we come in peace vibes. They had to become as visually vulnerable as possible. Despite the dire circumstances, Delmon was enjoying the scenery.
New planet, new station, and the sign reads, Golden Land of Opportunity and Adventure. Somehow I highly doubt this. Looks to me like a shanty town at the arse end of the universe.
A Haven captain approaches with the firing squad and hold their ground several yards away. Who are you strangers?
Is this how you handle all refugees? Is some criminal transport arriving soon after ours? Because there's no need for such weapons for simple refugees, I assume.
The captain points his rifle at Goth.
Mr. Mayor, please be careful. If I may offer you some advice, these gentlemen do not look to be in a mood conducive towards idle banter. Perhaps we should just get to the point.
The captain then pulls his rifle on Remus.
Would you kindly point at the rifle somewhere else? You think that makes you look powerful? Intimidating?
The soldiers look nervously at one another. They can't believe someone was laughing in their captain's face.
This morning, I held someone's beating heart in the palm of my hand.
We zoom in on Remus's terrifying, cold and calculating eyes.
That is power. So please, you think that trigger makes you look powerful? It makes you a child. So go and point it somewhere else.
The hot-headed captain grits his teeth and tells Remus to watch his tongue as Remus continues to laugh at him. Goth stands in between the two and de-escalates.
I am Goth Vailore, and I present you what is left of Anvil Station. I present to you Remus. He has handled the care of our crew and passengers on the trip, and I would expect your doctors to work with him in continuing this. There were many chemical as well as low-gravity and spatial anomalies on the space station itself, and many of the people aboard need medical assistance.
The captain receives orders through his teleslab to bring in the leader and take the rest of the visitors to Camp Rust. They throw shackles on Goth, Remus, and Delmon with little resistance, as this was the plan. The captain roughs up Remus a bit.
Remus kept my people alive since we left him. See to it you don't kill them. Any harm to them is harm to me. I will go with them. Doctor, keep an eye on the passengers. Delmon, keep an eye on everyone.
Goth is hauled away as Remus and Delmon are taken separate ways, and this would be the last time they see each other for months. Goth gets inside the ship that then lifts off and cruises toward the inner workings of Haven City. He looks back at his people, then back toward the ugly city.
From hell to hell the travelers go.
We descend deep into the bowels of Haven City and arrive upon a small civilization of those thought slain and dispersed. Spiraling slowly through the dark and twisted emerald palaces laced with dungeons and rocky canals, we see Survey Day cultists stronger than ever, infesting its confines. Among them, we see abducted citizens from all parts of the continent, all walks of life, all ages, being transported in cages all throughout its winding networks, some dead, most alive, only to be devoured and preyed upon by the old servants of the green gods. We cut to a naked cultist who appears to be in his prime, in peak physical shape, soaked in the blood of the innocent. A migrant bound in shackles is brought to this Survey Day cultist and is quickly apprehended in the bloody grips of him. The migrant cowers helplessly in fear as the cultist begins to chant. Suddenly, a tendril juts out of the cultist's mouth and penetrates the migrant between the eyes and begins sucking their life essence from their vessel. The cultist moans in ecstasy as he shivers from the frigid power flowing through his body. The essence was unlike anything the Survey Day cultist ever tasted. Unlike the souls of gamma types, the essence of migrants' souls was natural, more fulfilling, euphoric. The cultist tosses the body and orders another. We cut to carts filled with bound migrants being delivered to thousands of underground palaces to be devoured by cultist elites. Suddenly, darting down the corridor tunnel in the opposite direction, we see a frail young woman in her early 20s sprinting at full speed with a look of hysteria. Like a ghost, the pale white girl can be seen fleeing up the tunnel being pursued by 3 cultists. She arrives to a dead-end gap in the caverns and almost slides off. She peers over the dark cavernous void as deep as her eyeless sockets went. The cultists can be heard approaching, motivating her to move on. She takes a powerful yet uncoordinated leap, like that of a hulking beast with little balance, and propels herself toward the other side, grabbing onto the rocky walls. Surprised by her own strength, she hesitates, but then realizes that she has to get a move on. Suddenly, she begins to puke uncontrollably from the overwhelming radiation stirring within her, causing her to lose grip and sends her plummeting 20 feet below, then getting impaled through her frail abdomen by an unfortunately placed stalagmite. Dead. The cultists arrive to the edge and see her ravaged corpse. With looks of despair, they circle back around for help in saving her. Moments pass and the cultists arrive with an elite one who comes hovering down to where her body was last seen, only to find a puddle of green coagulated blood. We cut to the girl climbing out of a manhole inside of an alleyway of Haven City. Homeless people scatter as the girl bursts through, her whole body morphing and pulsating with fleshy tendrils that pull the stalagmite right out of her body and launches it into a small shanty town. The girl's pale, bloody body stabilizes as she looks up at all of the homeless staring in fright at her cold, naked body. She immediately darts off into the dark night. The Minister of Resources and Finance stands at a table filled with holo screens displaying vital information pertaining to the city's economy and growth. Several advisors stand around it with their eyes glued on the information, racked with confusion. No matter how they distributed resources, month over month, they were coming up short across the board. It was obvious what was happening, but no one wanted to say because no one could explain it. The minister turns to his most reliable advisor and data scientist, Professor Syrian Arclight, for a word. Syrian, a caramel-complexed Nebi man with sandy blonde hair, clears his throat and provides more insight on what was actually happening. It was clear as crystal. The planet was hemorrhaging power, or more so, never had it to begin with. It's as if the technology level obtained by their civilization was only sustainable by a mysterious boon of power that seemed to be fading. The minister walks slowly around the table, watching the data. His psyquadrian body buzzes and creaks in the quiet room filled with the sound of zero solutions. He asks Syrian if this could at all be related to the fading protective shield around the planet. What do you call it? An ozone layer, Minister. Syrian continues. It's not related. Another advisor interrupts in disagreement. How can it not be? It's not a coincidence. Syrian realizes it's late and everyone is tired and frustrated. With calm and confident intellect in the field of computer science, Syrian explains why the fading ozone layer is not linked to the hemorrhaging of power. The advisor's confusion is satiated by his explanation, and he trusts in Syrian's knowledge and challenges him no further. The minister replies, "You speak of this world like it's a computer. It doesn't make sense." Syrian can't figure it out either, at least not yet. We have to think of something soon. The redistribution of resources to power the city is damaging our communities, draining them dry. The minister turns on the news, tuning into the backlash that he has created with his action. His order to send the strangers from beyond to Camp Rust has the city ablaze with disdain, and the media reflected this. We see everyone from citizens to celebrities expressing their mistrust for the minister. Several high-ranking Haven guardsmen speak out and threaten action while counting the minister's days. We see Gamma Tube star Ali mesmerizing her audience with unmatched charisma as she roasts the minister's stupid little horn things on his head and compares him to other stupid things with stupid horn things.
The strangers from beyond are people like you and me, and I rep the people. How can you say no to that? Well, there's only one thing to do. Look him in the eyes.
Ali gets real close to the camera.
Nod politely and kill the crap out of him.
The interwebs go crazy and are flooded with kill the crap out of him memes. Syrian turns off the hologram and turns to the minister and tells him that he can fix that part before it's too late. Just let them leave Camp Rust. We'll figure out the resources shortage later. They are people. The minister asks everyone to leave except for Syrian. Everyone clears the room except for a handsome, quiet, unassuming man in tactical gear, Syrian's bodyguard, Sasha Petrov. He leans on a wall, emotionally detached from the intensity of the war room. He keeps his eyes steady on every entryway into the room. The minister clears his throat, and Syrian gives him a look. Sasha doesn't care though. If shit hits the fan, I have to pull you out. No questions. You let me do my job, I'll let you do yours. Syrian couldn't argue. Sasha was Haven's most in-demand bodyguard, and it ran in the family. The minister requests for his friend to leave at least, pointing to his large android companion, an all-black panther, laying by his feet. It gets up and growls at the minister. It knew all languages like any other advanced AI. Sasha says, "Nope." Syrian politely pleads, and Sasha gives in and tells his androidimal to exit the room. The minister waits for the room to clear, then proceeds to show Syrian a map displaying the increasing trend of people going missing. Syrian looks at the board and sees disturbing numbers, along with a heat map of cases all across the city. Ever since the migrants arrived, more migrants have gone missing, more and more every day, and none of this is reported on the news. only stories that put a spin on why I pour resources into Haven forces. The minister presses a button that shows the correlation between an increase in Survey Day cultist sightings and vanishing migrant numbers. Syrian is floored. The numbers didn't lie. I need Haven forces to protect the people right now. Education can wait, or there won't be a generation to educate. Syrian passionately interrupts. Then why won't you tell the people this, make them aware of this, to put things in perspective? The minister tells him to lower his voice. The Survey Day are everywhere. If they learn of my awareness to them, it could complicate matters. Syrian thinks to himself. The minister was just in his reasoning, but this wasn't the way. Syrian looks into the minister's eyes. I'll trust you and keep this between us. But you can't do this alone. You need to inform Tempest and Gate of the reemergence of these people. We have a means to deal with them. We have Haven Guard. Please, let the migrants free. Syrian salutes the minister, then leaves the room escorted by Sasha. The minister watches him leave, then turns to the missing persons map. Syrian's words have a lasting toll on his conscience. But the minister's pride, ego, and sense of duty fogs his judgment. We move throughout Haven, soaring over its beautiful, diverse, neon grit societies, all making use of the newest and most convenient form of communication, teleslabs. A magically imbued rune that allows you to communicate with other rune-bearing individuals telepathically at any time. They're small, maybe a couple inches in diameter, circular in shape, and with different rune arrangements based on user preference and such. There's quite a variety. They can be used for many things, from radios and music players to mass communication from a source teleslab alongside a bunch of linked ones. Many people have embraced this Magitech, save for a good 30% of those who heed the wisdom of an outspoken mystic detective named Vernali Connell, a rugged but highly influential voice on the matter. We see an emerald-eyed, stubble-faced man bluntly stating that he's worried about how widespread this mix of magic and technology has gone and what it might bring, as should everyone else.
Look, I might not remember much, but what I do know is where there's people, there's bound to be some sort of boogeymen messing around with their minds. People or magic runes, one or the other.
Vernali drops an F-bomb and attacks the people who are ignoring the possibility before being cut off the air entirely. He wasn't media trained, but he knew what he was talking about. Breaking news floods all broadcasts of more android riots erupting throughout the districts. News reports speak of a string of attacks on EMP towers that are being organized using teleslabs and are thus untraceable. We are shown a myriad of faces of suspects accused of being ringleaders in the matter. A news anchor runs through a crowd of android and Psyquadrian rioters protesting. We are then treated to live footage of an EMP tower under attack, being completely shut down as androids rappel up and down it, spray painting Anarchy 12's infamous symbol upon it. The news anchor runs up to a Dorinthian activist. Hello, miss. We are happy to see other races getting involved. As a non-android, what's your stance on Haven Guard's EMP towers? The woman turns her neck slowly and looks into the eyes of the reporter. Her eyes fill with pain as a tear swells up but swiftly wiped away. She gathers her composure. I feel isolated, angry that my people are being oppressed. Were we not worth creating? Taken back by the passion and touched by her emotion, the reporter asks, You seem to really identify with our machine counterparts. The woman turns to the camera and looks at all the people as we zoom in closer to her face. She says, We are them. They are us. I am you. You are me. We are the people. Right, Jacob? The TV cuts off. In the reflection of the flat screen, we see R-Type X pondering with the remote in his hand. He looks down at a pair of teleslabs in the other, becoming more and more curious of them. He turns and looks at his sword beside him as it once again begins to resonate. Suddenly, a homeless man breaks his gaze with a tin cup in his hand, shaking it. The two make eye contact for a moment. The homeless man looks down at R-Type's new fly footwear, gifted by Ali, and assumes R-Type is well off. He says,
For the people? For the people, right?
The man repeats Jacob's favorite phrase and holds his cup out. R-Type X grabs his blade and stands up. He reaches into his cloak pocket and gives the man all the bizquirks he collected in his past month's travels and departs the homeless shelter. R-Type drifts through the city on foot, taking in his surrounding. He sees android caution zones as well as zones that stretch over major and iconic public buildings such as hospitals, graveyards, and Haven Guard bases. R-Type understands the motives behind it, but like everything, it is a matter of perception. The death tolls have slowed exponentially thanks to the EMP fields creating safe zones for bystanders who come under attack by the sentient, vacant machinery that becomes possessed by hostile abyssal spirits. It buys enough time to save lives, and has even unveiled Nox sleeper droids left over from the war. A large misconception is that EMP towers are harmful all the time, but this is just not the case. Jacob wouldn't be so dense. Every EMP tower has several field phases. The most commonly used is the non-intrusive field and intrusive field that must be activated. There were some androids that became possessed by abyssal spirits. This was mistaken for an EMP attack, and since then it has been open season for anti-EMP propaganda. Due to hostile sentient attacks causing casualties during riot raids, Haven Guard has been directed to use all offensive fields during raids, which is practically all the time. In regards to perception, it looked bad. R-Type can relate, as he thinks back to the Takena influencing his mind in the past. He stops and observes a group of young teenagers with their faces covered, hurling debris at an EMP tower and the Haven Guardsmen protecting them. We cut to an active riot zone as chanting and blazing fires can be heard in the streets. We slide into a hole in the wall, a small base of rebel operations. We see the back of a chrome silver android in a black trench coat standing before a board of strategies and formations on a map of the city. We see a close-up of their chrome-silvered hands putting the final touches on falsified Atlas Electric Company documents. Several androids run in carrying an injured Wardenary girl, shot by way of friendly fire for the android cause. Mirror 3, we need medical aid. Mirror 3 turns around. The android's face was partially done up, with a third of it identical to one of the familiar faces being accused on the news. Mirror gives orders to several rebels to have them prepare for tonight's large-scale attack. A voice whispers from the darkness of the night and the deepest shadows in the room.
That's a tall order, companion.
Standing in the shadows, we barely see a night-skinned man obscured. The shape of a stovepipe hat, the glistening of nipple rings, and a belt buckle is all that can be made out of the figure. That EMP tower is a Haven Guard base. People will be harmed. Mirror 3 points at the injured Wardenary girl. She is harmed currently. We are in the now. The witch doctor looks in Mirror's blank polished face. Witch doctor, please, a rebel pleads as he tries to stop the bleeding. I've seen kings and despots alike fall because of their hubris. The witch doctor disappears into the shadow and reappears over his new patient and begins applying gauze soaked in special oils. Mirror 3 cocks his pistol and leaves out with several rebels. R-Type X arrives at an excavation site encompassing one of the district's larger and most grand teleslabs that is servicing pretty much the entire center of the district. The site is being vastly occupied by the Solarium Coalition, a loose conglomerate of like-minded and peaceful individuals, communities, and peoples, with each dedicated to creating a better haven through charitable works, public attractions, mediation of disputes and issues, in a united effort of strengthened community. R-Type makes his way toward the teleslab. We cut to a tall, bearded, unathletic man bound in the robes of the sect. Esoteric tattoos decorate his graying, wiry hairline as he stands with handwritten tome of liturgy in hand and a peculiar staff in the other. The high prelate of the sect of the One, Malros Engram, stands before his followers for a mantra of empowerment before dispersing them to conduct further research of the teleslabs. Malros was frighteningly influential, thus his position. It is a fact that it was his influence that led to Anarchy honoring a truce with Tempest, thus bringing an age of peace. He points his ceremonial staff, adorned with a golden tree with the red eye in the middle of its trunk, toward their hearts and uplifts them through tongue. He preaches to his apostles of today's purpose, then sends them off. He spots R-Type X standing by the largest slab and makes his way over, but not before summoning his bodyguards to come with. R-Type feels the gloss and luster of the room. His Aura Vitae fitted hat grows warm in response to the magic. Through the One, we are given new life and new chances. R-Type turns and sees Malros and guards standing behind him. Malros begins to educate R-Type on some of the research the Coalition has discovered thus far. He tells him about anomalite, a natural crystal formed as a byproduct of anomalous spatial disturbances such as black holes, exploding stars, and us migrants. R-Type turns back at him, intrigued. Now he has his attention. With Malros's sage-like understanding of the natural sciences and the magic behind it, he explains that due to every migrant being tossed out of a black hole, they all have anomalite in their cells. R-Type X observes Malros intently. Malros continues. The anomalite becomes supercharged by teleslabs with enough arcane energy to stabilize molecular dystrophy on a grand scale. We strangers of the beyond are walking ambrosia for the frontier district. R-Type X removes the scar from his face, revealing a great big smile. That's good news. The minister would have to be in complete denial to keep up with these schemes. I like you all. Malros smiled. So you see their importance. R-Type nods. Yep. And places his hand on the slab and proceeds to fracture a portion of it by crushing it with gravity. R-Type grabs a large fragment and prepares to stow it away. Shocked, Malgrim asks him to place that back, but before he can continue, he is summoned by his peers. Before leaving, he commands his guards to convince R-Type to return the teleslab chunk. They all turn and look at R-Type X, the Haven's strongest title holder, and they were hesitant. We cut to a large pair of orange eyes staring into the solarium's excavation lights illuminating the cloudy night sky. The soft light blue fur of a small mothkin girl glows under its radiance. Min Gray, like all migrants, was devoid of many memories, but what she'll always know and feel is her hatred for lights. She asks one of Malros's cultists passing by to turn the lights down, like way down. Suddenly, she feels a tug on her wing and turns around to see towering over her Vernali Kano, lighting up a smoke. Focus, Min, he mumbles. Min was frighteningly OCD when it came to hygiene, and today, Vernali has let the field get the best of him. Min Gray steps back. Relax, Kano, don't let this place drive you mad, or you'll be running around like these geniuses in these Section 1 robes before you know it. It's Sect of the One, and they aren't any more crazy than you and me, or Tempest. There's weird shit on this planet. I can feel it. Been feeling it ever since we got processed and left Camp Rust. their partner, Malros, arrives, and the three begin to discuss their research and plans for teleslabs. Vernali warns of how linking magic to the mind telepathically leaves the weak-willed susceptible to dimensional beings even far worse than abyssal entities. He proposes putting in some sort of safeguard. Min Gray steps forward and shares her research. She slowly draws out her mythical eldritch axe-bladed guitar, Gruul Saber, a magical legendary electric guitar from a land she once knew as home. With it, she will connect it to the grand teleslabs a la telepathic amplifiers, and with every riff shredded upon the mythical beast that is Gruul Saber, will please the eldritch gods of rock, in turn shielding all telepathic communication between our beloved brains. Vernali looks impressed. You know, that reminds me of what this archbishop of the Mad Yurtle cult once said before I drove a stake into his heart. The difference between genius and madness is whether others can hear the music as well. Min nods her head. Yep, what he said, as she strums Gruul Saber softly. The power in its tune reminds Malros of how grateful he is for his allies. The frontier had a future, permissible by the one. Malros commends his Solarium allies. Vernali gets serious and suggests that they get started like yesterday. We see a close-up of a traffic light that burns out. We cut to a man slamming on his brakes at an intersection across from a highly guarded EMP tower. It seems the power went out, and his driver was highly conscious of traffic regulations. He suddenly spots a group of androids in all black standing in formation under the shadows awaiting orders. Something was about to go down. He gets out of the car and adjusts his bi-iris focal lenses for a clearer look. "Excuse me," a voice utters. The man turns around to a rusty homeless android. "Hey, I'm glad you're here. Can you hook up your batteries to these stoplights? Hey, and maybe charge the battery up to my car while you're at it? Come on. The rusty droid laughs. "I don't work for free." The man doesn't laugh with, "Then what were you built for? Come on, there's no need for fire hydrants in District 9. Get out of here, get out of your mind." The rusty android doesn't move. The man looks at him sideways, piece of trash, and prepares to get back into his car when suddenly the droid jams its pointer finger into the man's forehead and holds it there as the man seems to be having a seizure for a moment until his eyes flash white, then back to normal. A disguised Mirror 3 leans in closer to the awakened sleeper android and whispers a code overriding Anarchy's protocol and replaces it with his own commands to assist in this tower raid. The sleeper nods in agreement. Mirror commands his rebels to take their stations, and each of them disperse to their respective locations as Mirror makes his way to the front gate to create a diversion. Suddenly, appearing before him in a flash of a second, are two individuals with their backs facing him. A tall hooded figure in a black trench on the left, and another in lightweight mercenary gear on the right. Mirror 3 steps back. A young man with long black hair with a neon blue streak in it turns to look at Mirror 3 and says, "You might want to step back," before gently pushing Mirror backward across the street with what could only be telekinetic force barely lifting him off of his feet. Mirror reaches for his pistol, but spots dozens of laser sights aimed all over him by hidden snipers. The words, "It's nothing personal," echoes across the street as Mirror looks up and finds no one. The two strangers vanishing completely in the same fashion they appeared. Mirror calls off the operation and backs away from the site as suggested. We spin and spiral around the laser lights, following it to its origin. Perched up in the upper canopy of District Square are several Titian Legion snipers, accompanied by their god, Ionic Sajanar, a Raelagarian outcast, yet revered as a god by a deadly organization that is obsessed with bionic modifications, and also viewed as a prophet for his vivid drug trips. The Archbishop observes the tower through optic scopes held to his eye by a serving legionnaire. Haven Guard calls this an EMP tower. The Titians worship technology and see it as a means to ascension in a higher form. Sajanar's motives and past are shrouded in mystery, yet he is still revered as a god by his followers due to his implants and drug trips. 2 large cybernetic spider legs reach out from under his robes and pulls himself up on the side of the building for a better view of their work. We cut to 2 guards standing by an entrance. One is getting ready to be relieved soon, but he announces that he can't wait any longer to take a break. The guard waves him off. It's fine, go you big child. The last guard is reading a magazine that only covers the most prestigious wonders of Haven. His stomach begins to growl when he comes across a 4-page article for a new restaurant called Labyrinth of Pan. As he drools over the food porn, we see Yatagan casually standing beside him, breaking into the keypad system. The guard begins to get a little hot and bothered by the food and fixes his crotch while looking around embarrassed to see if anyone sees him. Yatagan, completely concealed, successfully breaks into the door, causing both doors to swing open, revealing 2 guards coming to relieve the others. They both see and aim their rifles at Yatagan's white mask. Freeze! The Haven guardsman with the food boner, still unable to see Yatagan, turns around embarrassed. Suddenly, Matson Mare lands from above, and with a swift slash of his large photon beam sword, the Dorotama, he slices right through the rifle and the guard's fingers. The other guard goes to fire but has his rifle pulled forcefully out of his hand. Then Matson kinetically pushes it back into his helmet with bone-crushing force, shattering the helmet and the rifle. Dim, purple lead lights pulsate through Yatagan's metal-plated body. He was impressed by his protector's proficiency. Yatagan has worked with many criminals, and though this kid was not a criminal, he sure had potential to be one. Matson turns and looks at the guard, then at his boner. Man! Matson kinetically pulls the guard in at high speed and bashes his reinforced vambrace into his head, knocking the guard out. His gauntlet reverts and folds back up into his data brace. Yatagan walks up to Matson and uploads a map of the entire tower into his data brace. This is our first run on a real tower. Don't mess this up. Matson nods. After you. We watch as Yatagan walks tactfully throughout the base, concealing himself and his protector, Matson, with the mystical veil. Magitech androids were thought to be a myth, but Yatagan would have us all question that. Matson swiftly and mercilessly maims every guard they must pass stealthily until they reach the control room. We cut to an operator watching all the cameras, seeing nothing of concern. Yatagan and Matson reach the control room doors after taking out the guard on the outside. We then pan through the wall on the other side of the doorway and see a Haven Guard veteran and Master CQC specialist who fought in the Nox War alongside Tempest during the Nox satellite raid. He stands with his back to the wall, rifle drawn. He signals to the tower operators to stay hidden under their desks and not make any moves. The soldier listens closely and hears nothing. He checks his wrist camera and sees nothing. The soldier opens the door and peers out, finding nothing. He lowers his rifle and walks over to the railing, looking over it. It was too quiet. Suddenly, behind him we see Matson standing with a tense hand harnessing kinetic force. The soldier aims his rifle but then looks up at the ceiling, seeing that it is covered in all of the neutralized bodies of the Haven Guard soldiers, held in place by force until Matson performs a gesture like he was ripping down a kinetic hold, sending all the bodies pouring into him. The mass of bodies forms a gigantic ball and he hurls them down the stairs. Matson closes the door behind himself. Yatagan plugs in the Archbishop's override panel assimilator, giving the Archbishop full control to the tower's network. Archbishop is notified and he commences the countdown. Yatagan turns and looks at the Haven Guard's tower's operators being subdued by Madsen, his android eyes glowing through his white mask. The protocol finalizes. For traditional purposes, Yatagan impales the control panel with a short sword, an infamous criminal calling card of his. "Ready to go when you are, Nagamaki," he says to Madsen, a codename that they agreed upon. Suddenly, leaping from out of nowhere, a much older and mature Johnny Sniff thrusts an EMP baton into Yatagan's side, unleashing a pulse of intrusive electromagnetic waves. However, these waves are instantly and visually diffused by the Titian lesion device modded into Yatagan's spine that nullifies EMPs, rendering them absolutely ineffective to an android. Johnny Sniff, once a gate agent, now promoted into Haven Guard's recon unit, stands confused. Yatagan grabs his forearm and with android strength breaks it. Johnny screams in pain. Madsen grips Johnny's body with his kinetic hold, then sends heavy kinetic force, hitting him like a truck and blasting him through the reinforced bulletproof windows to his demise. Haven Guard battlecopters come hovering around the tower windows with guns and spotlights pointed directly at the scene, but they see no one in the tower control room. Only the Yatakan short sword, impaled in the control panel. We cut to Archbishop Sajanar, too serious to smile for today's successes. It was just the beginning to Scabbard's plan. He flips the switch, triggering a signal that deteriorates all communication links between EMP towers. Then, in a matter of seconds, every EMP tower in Haven City explodes. We see Mirror 3 standing on a rooftop watching the entire city light up. Within his face, we see a swarm of Haven Guard copters scattering abroad. A large news ship soars over his head, displaying live footage of the scene. Johnny Sniff laying dead from the fall, and the Yatagan short sword gleaming from atop the smoldering towers. Anyone with a lick of street wisdom knew that this was Yatagan's work. However, this was monumental. Witch Doctor walks up beside Mirror 3 and shakes his head in disappointment. This is what anarchy would have wanted. Mirror turns to him. "You're wrong about that." Witch Doctor and Mirror glare at each other. Then Mirror departs into the night. Witch Doctor fades into black as we follow him into darkness, only to appear beside Johnny Sniff during his last few breaths. Johnny turns to the Witch Doctor slowly, thanking death has come to receive him. The Witch Doctor pulls a plump avian creature out from under his stovetop hat by the neck. It screeches relentlessly until Witch Doctor coughs into its face, shotgunning odd and strange spices into a cloud. The creature suddenly goes into a haze. Johnny Sniff's eyes widen as he sees the Witch Doctor dancing oddly with his polished ironwood staff just before slowly passing out. We cut to Min Gray, standing in front of the excavation site's largest teleslab, shredding her gruel saber with godly finesse. Her large fluffy antennae sway in tandem with the sonic jubilee resonating from her performance. The solarium then turns up the arcane amplifier, connecting gruel saber and the teleslabs, causing the arcane energies to become enveloped in a surge of eldritch power, then telepathically rammed into everyone's ears, causing their heads to explode with sonic mayhem. Min doubles down and begins to take on all the favor the rock gods pour onto her as Gruel Saber crackles with intense harmonic frequencies of genius flowing from Min's fingertips. One of Haven's most legendary guitar players stops and turns to listen to Min's ballad. An entire square of civilians gather around the teleslabs and Min. R-Type X closes his eyes and allows the music to engulf him. He also begins to hear the telepathic thoughts of everyone in the area connected to the grand teleslab that Min is powering. Vernali pulls the teleslab from his temple. It's working! The communication has returned. Clearer than ever, and most importantly, protected by eldritch rock gods who smiles upon Min's work with Grillsaber. We cut to a grand teleslab erected within a neighboring district. With a little black market neurohacking at play, this teleslab has been made to service an alleyway filled with slimy lowlives using the teleslabs to listen to the sensual sounds of nearby couples getting it on. Neurojackers. We see a dozen perverts congregating around the slab, invading the privacy of unsuspecting victims in the district. Drool splatters upon their handheld HD screens as live footage of a couple sharing a moment is being recorded. The perv grins as the couple changes positions, as a third woman in seductive pirate regalia covered in gold joins the hot mix. Everything but her glossy lips, obscured by her large gaudy pirate hat, was visible.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, pirate cosplay.
The perv grunts while in awe of her thickness. The woman tips her hat, revealing it to be none other than Cervantes de Agueja. D is for darling. She begins to really play into the illusion and starts rubbing strawberries on the other female's back while pouring ale into the man's mouth. All of the pervs tune in, too distracted to see large hooks lowering from Cervantes' ship floating above and then clamping onto the teleslab in unbelievably cartoonish fashion. Cervantes' arm reaches out of their screens and pulls them into the voyeur sex scene, and they all crash land in the couple's bed, pantless. Cervantes then reappears a bit larger than usual, and with all of their belts tied together forming into a giant whip, the D suddenly was for domination. Cervantes begins to crack it over their dirty asses while having it broadcasted on live teleslab TV. Once the grand teleslab has been fully hauled up into her ship and Cervantes tucks away the last wallet into her voluptuous bosom, she gets a call from R-Type X, unconcerned by the so-called electronic panic. Cervantes answers, and he sees a crowd of half-naked pervs standing beside her in a dark alleyway. R-Type's eyebrow raises with concern. Working hard? Cervantes smirks. You at a moth concert, King? She's got a point. Cervantes then points up at the teleslab hoisted upon her ship. R-Type smiles, then suddenly feels his sword resonating. The call gets disconnected from a sudden disturbance caused by the EMP towers blowing up throughout the districts, unbeknownst to them. Cervantes scoffs. Here I am trying to help him gather Chaos Emeralds and not even a thank you. I'm gonna sell this bitch. With one swing, Cervantes cracks a single leather belt over the butt cheeks of every single one of the pervs at once. Impossible, but somehow achieved during this lusty, mesmerizing haze. This snaps them all back to reality, and they all begin to scatter out of fear of their crimes. We cut to one of the naked pervs running through the alleyway, who then dives into a pile of trash to hide. He looks around and finds that the coast is clear and no one is following him. And suddenly, the perv is overcome with a sense of dread as a cold surge shoots down his spine, causing his hairs to rise. He turns around and looks up to find a slender being with deep black eyeballs and ashen white skin. An uncryptid, the mysterious multidimensional beings created from the omnitemporal anomaly formed in the Gate Center's labs, now lurks and hunt the inhabitants of the common plane. The perv, frozen with fear, can hardly move or feel as the uncryptid approaches. A moment passes and we cut to a mangled, rigor mortis corpse of the perv hitting the ground as the uncryptid stands beside it looking down. The harmonic shriek of Min Gray's Gruul Saber can now be heard as they increase the Solarium Teleslab's amp technology. The eldritch frequencies were tantalizing to the uncrypted and begins to entice and draw it near. We see several other uncryptids notice the godly electric guitar shredding and begin to make their way toward it. We see the minister's guards patrolling the entrances to his quarters. Sneaking through a back alleyway in the shadows, then up the side of the building, we see a slim shadow infiltrating the security of the establishment. Once the figure finds the correct wall on the correct floor, they attach a black market device that allows them to hack into anything on the other end of the wall. Removing its hood, we see a white and purple-haired Quo with orchid eyes typing at high speed to hack into the vault inside. Leaf was an exceptional hacker and was on a mission not only for the people, but himself. To avoid from being tracked, Leaf is actively removing all files and information from any existing city records. While at it, he creates a backdoor into the minister's database in order to sabotage his attack on the strangers from beyond, and does so successfully before slipping away unnoticed. We cut to a mass of rioters protesting the minister's usage of Camp Rust. We see signs depicting the execution of him and/or fall from power, captioned with venomous phrases. We cut to footage of Ali at a Gamma Award show speaking out against the minister's imprisonment of 80% of the strangers from beyond during her acceptance speech. Using her influence, she begins to create a conversation around the authoritative position appointed by the people. Ali triggers a wave of memes about such a rank that would come to be known as the Haven Lord memes and would typically depict Tempest himself or involve his iconic white fedora. One thing led to another, and it was discovered that within the lost policies hidden away by Governor Advocate lies doctrine and loopholes that would allow a Haven Lord to be appointed by the people in the absence of a governor. A Haven Lord has the power to overwrite and dissolve titles if the chairperson shows malicious intent toward innocent Haveners. In the light of this news, Ali's movement calls for the Gate Center to step in and for Tempest to stand up again for his people. We cut to footage of Jacob giving his own speech to the people who rally behind him in the streets and around Camp Rust. Jacob holds up a battle flag of what he is calling the Manticore Rebellion, a revolution made with extreme force. Calm and determined, Jacob states that this revolution has been in the making since Haven Guard was birthed, and it won't be stopped now. Jacob outright threatens the minister, a promising threat. Marshall takes the microphone from him for his own good. Marshall Mesa drank from the same cup as Tempest. A voice of reason and optimism, he speaks to the people and tries to help them see that the biggest issue to the city is the crime, corruption, and bias, not the migrants. And Marshall would be absolutely correct. Without knowing about the Survey Day cult, Marshall's point still stands. If the neighborhoods were safer, built up and less desolate, then the Survey Day cultists would not be able to snatch migrants or anyone for that matter. Marshall has begun to open up Mesa Marts all over the city. They become a general boon to the surrounding areas, remedying the toxicity typically found in the ugly city. Marshall was known for his eccentric, cartoonish antics, as he can usually be found bouncing around the commercial at high speeds and defying physics without special effects, advertising the Mesa Marts and the betterment of the community. "You see a dilapidated building, I see a new neighborhood center," he says as he spins around in a circle, changing into a coyote construction worker outfit with a hard hat on, smiling. The next morning, we see Professor Syrian Arclight getting out of the car to enter the minister's quarters. He is flooded by protesters and news reporters, bombarding him with questions about how he could serve as advisor to such a horrible person. Sasha, along with other bodyguards, usher him through safely. An older woman pushes a guard out of the way and shoves her microphone into Syrian's face. Or at least she tries to, when suddenly, Sasha snatches the mic and grabs her wrist to keep her at bay. "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to step away from the gentleman." Suddenly, a renowned bounty hunter, Nakama, leaps onto the scene with the vibro blade brandished and lunges in Syrian's general direction while gutting a bodyguard, spilling his guts out onto the ground. Syrian confidently holds his ground, confident in his own security, just as Sasha steps through a portal with a blindsided knee shattering several of Nakama's ribs. Sasha then judo flips Nakama onto the ground and attempts to force his arm into a portal that Sasha summons beside him. They struggle, but Sasha begins to overpower him. A combat knife ejects from Nakama's armor, but before he could retrieve it, Sasha's hand reaches through another portal, taking it for himself. Then stabs Nakama right in the shoulder, then finally forces Nakama's arm into the portal that immediately seals itself with a clean decapitation. Sasha jumps to his feet and gets Syrian inside as the other guards pounce on the maimed assassin. The doors shut behind them. The minister watches the news with his advisors, trying to wrap his head around this Haven Lord loophole. It was real and gaining traction. Syrian walks in. "Have you made your decision yet, Minister?" The minister, frustrated, turns to Syrian. "Whose side are you on?" Syrian furrows his brows. "I believe you are mistaken. I am here on behalf of only one thing." Syrian pauses. He thinks about the minister's true intentions of stopping the disappearances of migrants at the hands of the Servidae. But this wasn't the right way. Syrian looks the minister in his eyes. "I'm here for the people." Another advisor shouts, "The Iron Republic are enemies of Haven, and so we brought them here as refugees. Okay, I get it. Keep your enemies close. But now we are accepting strangers from beyond? They could be enemies and must be vetted." Syrian reminds them all that the several hundred migrants that either escaped or were processed and released to camp have done nothing but good for the city. What nonsense are you spewing? The minister tells them to stop. He has his mind made. Syrian hopes he made the right decision, for there was still a way to redeem him. The minister announces that he will continue to keep his operation against the Servidae a secret, and will war with anyone trying to stop him. Syrian sighs. It was time for an intervention. We pan over Camp Rust and see migrants and Iron Republic refugees living among each other in a tense and highly volatile environment. We see an Iron refugee getting ready to swing a baseball bat at another when all of a sudden, the Dizzy Wizard jumps in between the two fighting and offers them a Dizzy Whiz Fizz jumbo-sized candy bar. "Are you sure you don't want to use this instead?" The refugee ponders. It was cold in Camp Rust, and the Dizzy Whiz Fizz chocolate warms you to the touch. The refugee puts his bat down and accepts the candy. The Dizzy Wizard was in support of Marshall Mesa and Tempest, and has made tremendous effort to spread happiness and joy by handing out the best the Dizzy Whiz Fizz factory had to offer. The Dizzy Wizard makes his rounds throughout the city, typically frequenting Camp Rust, and shares his rejection of the minister while fulfilling the benevolent wishes of the guard, heightening the Dizzy Whiz Fizz brand to its peak. We cut to a man with a limp and cane, casing out the interior of Camp Rust for the third day in a row. Grillian Point was a renowned teacher, but very hands-on in the field. He hated to see migrants discriminated against and came to the camp to assist in any way he could. After finding several hidden entryways into the camp, today he has smuggled in some Dizzy Whiz Fizz treats for the people, as well as Mesa Mart care packages. A child runs up and pleads for the last Dizzy Whiz bar in Grillian's hands. The young migrant had scars all over his arms, with some recently opened wounds. Grillian observes. Poor refugee kid, he thinks. By the looks of the wounds, it would seem that sharp bone matter has been jutting from out of this kid's arms, likely uncontrollably. Grillian bends down and hands him the candy, but also teaches him how to remain focused when experiencing anger. That way, he has more control over which part of the arm his bone blades extend out of, and so he wouldn't need to create so many open wounds. He explains it in a way that the child understands, saving him a lot of pain and suffering during the approaching phases of gamma-type puberty.
I don't remember seeing you during registration.
Grillian turns around and looks up at 3 Haven enforcers with guns and batons.
Grillian stands up but is pushed to the ground roughly, making him drop his cane.
The guard picks up his cane and observes it, only to uncover that it has a hidden knife in the end of it.
This man must be an Iron Republic assassin. Seize him. Suddenly, several razor-sharp slashes rend the wind, denying everyone from entering the area surrounding Grillian Point.
A migrant girl, with an air of coolness, comes rolling in slowly from the side, crouched over on a skateboard. Her back filled with what must be 10 to 15 swords. She looks over top her rose-tinted sunglasses and tells the Haven enforcers to back off. They begin to be surrounded by other migrants that she's leading as they approach, equipped with swords that she provided. The enforcers back off and retreat. Grillian stands up to his feet and introduces himself. He reaches out to shake her hand. She gives him a deceptively powerful handshake with her bionic grip and introduces herself as Ara. Grillian begins to thank her, but before he could say anything else, she cuts him off and with a shh, tells him to take this conversation somewhere else. We cut to a tarot card depicting a red phoenix-like creature, grasped between the 2 fingers of a shirtless man standing in the middle of the street in front of Camp Rust. His long brown hair, unkempt, obscures his face, only showing his red eyes. He tucks the card away and begins to slowly make his way toward Camp Rust's front gates. He stands in front of the guards and says nothing. The guards look at each other and approach him.
You have business here, Havener?
Rezanok's eyes flicker red as he smiles. I'm not from here. The guards become alert and apprehend him so they can scan his DNA. Rezanok lets them without any resistance. The device beeps oddly, indicating that there is no DNA match to any race they've ever seen, and assume he is a migrant from beyond. They bind him in cuffs and usher him inside. We cut to Rezanok being tossed inside Camp Rust. He slowly crawls to his feet and looks around at people just like him. Smiling, Rezanok wipes himself off and turns around to look at the great holoscreen broadcasting breaking news. Gordon Gale, the headmaster of the Gate Center, can be seen standing in front of several microphones for a public announcement, which was always a treat. Marshal Mesa, the Dizzy Wizard, and the entire city tunes in. Tempest stands before everyone, reading the crowd. He was in his most comfortable state, ready and willing to reach the people with his words. He knew what they needed and what the city wanted. He believes the minister is not handling the resources the right way. Tempest begins to sway the people and bolster his allies with the same goal, with words of affirmation. Tempest feels sorry for the migrants and knows the people themselves are the greatest resource the city needs. Tempest announces that he will take on the title and preside as Haven Lord of the People. The entire city rejoices and erupts with cheer. Tempest looks into the camera and speaks directly to the minister himself. He tells him to step down and that his work is finished. Tempest then informs him that all of his data and intel will not go to waste and will be utilized more efficiently. Leaf comes to Tempest's side and hands him the data. All the intel, including the minister's secret operation, lies in Tempest's hands but hasn't been opened yet. The minister looks dumbfounded and taken aback by Tempest's political chess move and the leak of data. An advisor runs into the room, informing them of the hacked back doorway into their servers. The minister looks at Syrian for further advice, and Syrian nods. You should step down. The minister surrenders to Syrian's influence. He realizes that data might be better of use in Tempest's hands after all. The minister takes off his headgear and informs Syrian he will step down. Syrian exhales and says good. He presses a button that lowers the gates, allowing Jacob and the Haven Guard to storm the minister's halls.
We cut to Camp Rust erupting with rebellion as we see Rezanok leading a charge to break everyone out of Camp Rust, including Iron refugees. Ara can be seen slicing and maiming any guards who attempt to shoot or harm migrants as they begin to successfully tear down the walls of the camp. Rezanok and an army of migrants march out of the camp, leaving neutralized guards in their wake. Grillion Point whistles an empowering tune that empowers and bolsters the hearts and encourage all the migrants as they are liberated from oppression upon the wings of freedom, led by Rezanok. Marshal Mesa watches it all unfold, a tear almost rolling from his eye. After a non-violent surrender from the minister, Jacob himself apprehends the minister and removes him from the halls. When suddenly, just before putting the minister into Jacob's vehicle, a bolt of Takena energy is hurled across the sky and crashes into the minister's chest, blowing him and Jacob's vehicle to smithereens. Jacob dives out of the way in time and sits up to find the minister laying dead in a pile of ruin. We see Oblivion lurking in the dark in someone's window, watching the news through the glass. She sees and hears Tempest's speech about being Haven Lord for the people. She is quite familiar with Tempest and remembers watching his street magic as a child before she was kidnapped. She ponders, if only she could make it to the Gate Center alive, then maybe they'd accept her. Maybe she could live a safer life and have a family. Suddenly, her body begins to mutate as a reaction to the magical energies radiating from the nearby teleslab, causing her to fall off the building's fire escape into the alleyway below. She hears voices and envisions necrofiendish entities appearing in her head, tongues of the necrofiend language burned into her skull, and all she can understand is gods over and over again. She screams at the top of her lungs in pain, then falls to her knees. Gods! What gods? Suddenly, appearing behind her are two elite cultists. Found you! We cut to Jacob Bastian, power walking through the streets, giving orders to the guardsmen. Now that Tempest was taking charge, he needed to make sure everything was in its right place. This included the most current and important issue, the resource crisis. Jacob wasn't alone, and didn't make decisions alone either. Two of his close allies joined him on both sides. Both mercenaries aligned with Haven Guard and Gate, Octavian Roth and Rokum. They weren't advisors, but they knew their shit. Octavian, or Ian, was a fit and lanky bald man tatted from head to toe with skeletal aesthetics. He was odd, but deceptively level-headed at times, likely due to his mutation, allowing him to suppress emotion. Rokum taps his Delmon whiskey bottle into Jacob's, and they both take a shot. Semi-bulky yet fit, Rokum was somewhat unsure of his stance on the minister. He's visited a lot of worlds in the past, and though he can't fully remember them, he'll always remember that nothing is black and white, and there's three sides to every story. This side, that side, and the truth. But he determined to see the guards' goals through. They both have come to report their street-level observations to Jacob. Ian brings up a heated topic about how he feels there was more behind the minister's methods. Jacob squints, like what? Ian continues, people have been disappearing before the migrants arrived. Disappearances have doubled since their arrival, and most of them are migrants. Sounds like a Haven Force problem, which is where resources have been heavily distributed. Jacob nods. Yeah, maybe to defend the minister's ass from the people when they overcome. Didn't you hear about that kid they're calling the Phoenix? He needed guards for him. Rokum informs them of Camp Rust's liberation and the disappearance of 5 migrants already. Jacob stops and tries to talk some sense into them both. Look, he points at a banner of Tempest draped on the side of a building. We finally have kept our promise. We have truly given to the people everything. The minister is dead, and we didn't have to get our hands dirty for once. This is a victory, fellas. Let's celebrate. Suddenly, they all hear a scream from around the corner. They rush to investigate, and find Oblivion cornered and under attack by two powerful cultists. The cultist goes to reach for Oblivion, but his head explodes as he's lifted off of his feet. We cut to Rokum aiming down his singed rifle, firing shots while walking forward. Another bullet zips through the second cultist's collarbone, staggering him as he erects a Takena shield. Jacob rushes in while firing his cannon, the big iron. Oblivion gets back onto her feet, frightened, and begins to book, but runs into Octavian, who was the most frightening looking person she's seen since being on the surface. Despite that, Oblivion can't help but feel herself calming down. It was almost euphoric in nature. She's never felt this way, not since a baby at least. Ian suppresses her and gets close enough to see her tormented body. With his medical knowledge, he deduces that her wound looked to be caused by transmogrification. How could she still be standing with wounds like these? He then notices a black market slave trade symbol tatted under her neck. An expert in the underground black market as well, Ian off the rib can tell she has been traded young and experimented on for almost 2 decades. We cut to Jacob firing the big iron as the cultist struggles to keep their shield up and them at bay. He reaches the cultist and a pistol whips him to the ground. So, some of you are still alive. Maybe we'll need to do one last sweep. The cultist spits out a mouthful of green blood. The Harbinger will be the new day. Yeah? Well, to the abyss with you and your prophecies, maggots. Jacob fires the big iron, blowing up the cultist's chest. Oblivion snaps out of her calm and begins to morph as 3 bladed wings gush out from her back in an attempt to decapitate Ian, but he rolls out of the way. Oblivion uncontrollably mutates while screaming in pain and launches herself into the air, flapping with a trio of fleshy bladed wings in retreat. Rokum and Jacob run over to Ian in awe at the mysterious monster. Jacob takes a swig. What was that? Months ago, the night before the mayor of Anvil prepared to land into Haven, we saw a group of Anvilites band together to organize their own landing. They felt that landing in the most inhabited area of an advanced civilization was a death sentence, and planned to jump ship into the jungle. We then see their ship soaring through the atmosphere, heading straight into the jungle wilds of New Nebu. Attached to the side of the ship, we see a mass of blue ooze that leaps off the ship and into the jungle. Fast forward to present day, as we pan slowly over the jungle, an exotic insect can be seen swooping over and around extraordinary flora and fauna, glowing with vibrant pinks and greens. The insect dips under some ruffling branches and lands on the broad, lean shoulders of a devilish-looking, pale-skinned, red-headed Dorinthian gentleman staring up into the lush canopy. As soon as the insect takes a step, the man grabs the insect between his fingers with quick, demonic speed and precision in one move, as not to stain his silk shirt. Razul Nosferatu, an ascendant of an old Dorinthian bloodline of demonkin and a retired general of an army of Hell Knights, Razul now spends his time doing what he's exponentially happier doing, not to mention even better at. He crushes the insect, causing it to burst with the blue bio-slime. Razul, curious, holds the ooze in front of his eyes, studying its unexpected consistency. Then he tastes it, licking his lips with his black tongue. Suddenly, behind him, we see a large mass of blue bio-slime forming. Razul turns around and sees a man standing before him that could pass as a stunt double, save for the pale blue skin and blue hair instead. Razul didn't realize anyone from the colony followed him this deep into the jungle. The bio-slime doppelganger is happy to be in company of someone as fascinating as Razul, in which to learn what it's like to be them. Razul asks him for his name. X1 wants to say X1, but X1 doesn't know any other languages, and just stares at Razul with a big, pleasant smile. Razul, impatiently and with a high degree of cockiness, says never mind, and gives him his own nickname, Azul. Razul takes his expensive silk shirt off, revealing his chiseled body, and tosses it in Azul's arms. Razul begins swiftly climbing the large tree until he reaches a large slimy nest that looks like a heart hanging from the branch. It was exactly the type of ingredient he needed to complete his next biggest smash dish. Razul reaches the height of the nest, but still finds himself too far to grab it. But to his luck, he senses a large camouflaged serpent getting ready to attack him. The creature swiftly strikes, but not fast enough, as Razul catches it right in front of his face, then wrings its neck out with one hand, killing it. Razul then uses the serpent to lasso the hive in. We cut to Razul and Azul walking through the forest. Azul carrying all of Razul's ingredients, including 2 more heart nests draped over his back. Razul enjoyed Azul's assistance. He never says a word and is always smiling. And he's quite strong. How would you like to work in one of my restaurants, Azul? Azul stares back, smiling. Okay, great. You start immediately. Hold these. We cut to a high-rise view of a rustling canopy as trees begin to fall from what sounds like thundering strikes hitting them. We cut to a short, yet muscular warrior swinging a titanic hammer into the center mass of a massive, large man-eating plant monster hitting into another tree. Goth was the ultimate adventurer, ready for anything and everything, accompanied by an acrobatic android cloaked in a tattered red coat, who somersaults onto a tree branch above Goth and activates an eventide spatial bridge, 2 gateways into a spatial warp zone perfectly fit for the brute. Goth lets out a war cry and leaps into the portal, and at an increasing velocity finds himself looping endlessly between them until Nomad opens the one above the colossal plant monster, where Goth comes crashing down with an almighty, thunderous smite, a move that they practiced in the past. The creature explodes and guts land all over them. Goth turns around with a mush on his face, giving Nomad the thumbs up. Nomad lowers his cloak, successfully protecting himself and a fresh painting he had just made of the scene. Walking into the newly Goth-cleared area, we see a man in a gray jumpsuit covered in a strange metal plating, weighing just a little more than the average shirt, with gray boots to match. Along with his jumpsuit, he wears a gray cloak over it, to keep himself concealed and to keep himself safe from the elements. What stood out the most was the white-gloved, floating, disembodied hand hovering over his head. Morris, the leader of the Wanderers, smashes his walking stick into a nearby tree, sending a melon down, plopping into his hands. Living plants! Living plants! Why in the world would anyone make this place their home? Nomad leaps down from the tree and continues to guide his fellow adventurers to the area he scouted out last night. Morris moves foliage out of their path with his stick as he, Goth, and Nomad walk into a seemingly abandoned Nebi Haven colony. Goth, somewhat let down by the lack of hostiles like he expected. Nomad educates Goth and Morris about these Nebi Haven colony forts and how they were created by the first few waves of colonists who attempted to find new opportunities after the jungle's conception. Every colonist has gone missing, though. Morris nods. To see so many resources left behind was troubling. Morris scribbles on the map that he was making. That's enough for today, friends. We cleared several paths north of the colony and found a fort of resources. That's a productive day, if you ask me. The Wanderers are all in agreement and turn around as a large eventide spatial bridge opens up before them, leading them right back to their colony safely and instantly, courtesy of Nomad. Nomad was a traveling martial artist and landscape painter who found joy in adventure and thus finds himself assisting with the migrants' colonization of Nebu. Morris and the adventurers were in charge of securing and scouting out the areas before expanding the colony outward. Not only will this colony be a home for migrants, it will be a home for many groups who have no homes. With the support and assistance of Haven Guard, the migrant colony is receiving military protection as well as a council of powerful and diverse advisors to see it through. With the mass influx of Calidians and Haven native Nibunese, this area needed to become as safe as possible. We cut to Aika, a celebrity musician and songwriter who was well on her way to being a much larger icon and historical figure by using her platform to help the people. Aika, despite being an android, was standing up for something that affects real lives. She was being groomed and counseled by two of the greatest leaders of all time, the Honorable John Quill, figurehead for the Nebi people, and Shaman Onric, a powerful Calidian mystic. Together, these three were responsible for uniting multiple races in a new world, untainted by the corruption of the ugly city. John Quill places his hand on Aika's little frail shoulders. Aika, you were built for this. When people see the great work you're doing over here, Yatagan will no longer be the face of androids. Aika is inspired by his words. Shaman Onric creeps closer, tall and rickety, his spooky blue mask made from the skull of a G-type with tribal engravings dangling from his waist. He explains further in order to really drive home the impact of their presence to Aika. The Calidians never had a home, the Haven native Nibunese never knew of their home, and the migrants need a new home. With the proper direction and leadership, this could be a foundation for a new civilization. John Quill has brought over several families of Nebi Havenites, and Onric brought over 5 trusted Calidian communes with the purpose of establishing open mutualism. Aika takes it all in. She knows that she shouldn't let the hostile environment intimidate her. The shaman tells her the only thing worth worrying about was not if, but when Brazilek and his forces show up. John Quill reminds Onric that thanks to his dream tech in Haven Guard, this so-called Brazilek that he keeps talking about would have a major disadvantage. Onric would love to believe that anything he himself could do would be enough, but he knew what his nemesis Brazilek was capable of. We cut to a large cargo ship docked on the coast. It wasn't just any ship. It was the Hold. This massive and reliable machine could transport a whole country itself, and it essentially was. We see the Calidian communes departing, followed by the Nebi people, and then finally the rest of Haven's most ambitious opportunists, all offboarding. Haven guardsmen can be seen operating heavy machinery, hauling large lab equipment off of the Hold as well. Equipment such as advanced technology produced as a result of Gates' science and Onric's shamanistic expertise in the realm of dreams. Gate Guard was created, a blend of shaman magic and tech that began to put the power in the hands of those who would use it for the people. Gate Guard was having its first facility set up in the Nebi Haven colony. The young, friendly, and laid-back Delmon Louis Lefty steps off the deck and looks at all the opportunity. A small ferret runs up and onto his shoulder. You see that, Loki? This is our new home. Frightmaster Louis Lefty, Aganon, was a smuggler and well-known trader. He had a lot of connections and was very personable and friendly. His relationship with Mesa Mart led him to assisting in transport of Haven Guard's diplomats and colonists. The jungle provided ample smuggling routes and opportunity for a new business. Louis makes his way down into the colony square to be present during the town hall taking place. Shaman Onric speaks to all the people crowding around his podium. He speaks of hope, unity, and good rest, ending on a positive, uplifting note to his Calidian brothers and sisters fleeing the terror of Brazilek. He then steps to the side, and the Honorable John Quill steps to the podium. We see hundreds of camera drones hovering about, catching the footage of Haven's largest celebrity addressing the New World and his Nebi brethren. He was quite familiar with Haven native Nibunese culture and the infighting that took place due to faction violence. With an inspiring speech, he calls for an end to that here in the New World and calls for them to get in touch with their roots. John Sage Quill feels like his people have abandoned the old ways. Yes, They have experienced much trauma, but their history is rich and deep with the teachings of Mama Yaga, and because she is gone, it does not mean we should abandon all she taught her people. John is not a religious man, but to abandon their history and ignore what Yaga Makai has started is what is truly destroying them and the Nebi culture. Brothers and sisters, I come to you today as a long-lost brother, one who has seen and felt your pain. I ask that you turn to your neighbor today, not in hatred, but in unity. Unity is strength. Where there is teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. There is no weakness in laying down arms. There is no fear of your neighbor, for those feelings are no longer justified. Today, we need to work together, not because of laws or circumstance, but because all of our brothers and sisters require that of us. It will take time, I know. No doubt, unity is something to be desired, to be striven for, but it cannot be willed by mere declarations. Join me in this peace, which we have not known in too long. Let us rebuild what we have lost and remember those who are gone. For it is in their memory that we work together, build together, and set the path of our future together. The people cheer and are filled with emotional gratitude. John sets Aika up for success. It was up to her to bring it all home. You can do it, Aika, he whispers in passing as she approaches the podium. Aika stands before everyone. A small girl in a short pink jacket here to motivate an entire colony. She was incredibly nervous, but with the ability to manipulate her voice, she sounded powerful and confident in tone. She begins to speak to the people and asks for their support in reinforcing these new lands with love and respect for one another. Due to her cutesy appearance, even the battle-hardened and shady types reconsider their disposition toward other neighbors. It was working. John Quill can see the faces responding to Aika's speech. Aika finishes strong using her powerful singing voice and ends the speech with a line from her latest single, which turned out to be an incredibly appropriate and relevant. The crowd cheers and Aika looks back at John, who gives her a thumbs up. We cut to the crowd and see everyone clapping, except for a suspicious night-skinned man in a black overcoat, black suit, checkered Trinity-knotted tie, slowly walking throughout the sea of people, observing and taking note of his surroundings. He was incredibly suspicious and didn't go unnoticed. The night-skin bumps into a tall, graying redhead woman whose face was covered in multi-layered scarves. The night-skin in her lock eyes, and he continues on. She pulls her scarf down, revealing it to be none other than Myra Dare. She watches him like a hawk before fading into the sea of people herself. Later that night, we cut to a small cabin deep within the jungle. Built underneath it is a high-end lab filled with large vats of red rage mist being synthesized by a sociopathic alchemist. We see Corazia in state of jubilee doing what he loves most, creating poisons that kill. Myra was operating alongside Atlas, however, it was a bit more rogue. Myra Dyra climbs down the cabin hatch into the lab, followed by two of her clones. She was operating alongside Atlas, however, a bit more rogue. She still had all the Atlas accesses she always had, and uses said accesses to stay in the loop. Myra is in possession of a powerful magic artifact called the Farsight Dorja, allowing her to create a finite set of clones whom she has dispersed out into the field to keep an eye on Atlas's enemies. In doing so, she learns of Haven Guard's heavy involvement in the migrant colonization. Myra was touched by the unity that they have achieved, but found it amusing that they didn't know that Atlas would soon come and bust their bubble. Myra didn't fully trust Jeremiah Oliver, but knew he meant business when it came to the colonization of New Nebu. She wonders if she'll have enough rage mist poison for them all. She inquires about the progress of the poison, and Corazia has since created several of them, each more effective than the last. He was merely perfecting it beyond imagination, but instead of saying all that, Corazia just states that it's going well. Myra nods, then turns back to the monitors displaying Atlas's bank account. 2 large deposits made from Cortec and Mills and Steiner Corp. Myra thanks, then hands each of her Dorja clones Cortec chips and orders. We cut to Jeremiah Oliver. He gives several orders to his vice executives, then signs off on a multi-archon deal. Business as usual. The night-skinned man we saw lurking within the rally of the town hall enters his room and sits at his desk. J.O. ends the call and greets him. Legion. Hello. Legion creeped Jeremiah Oliver out. More so, Nightskins in general. However, Legion was in business with Jeremiah. Himself being the CEO of Cortec Data Analytics, had his own brainchild. Something only the collective of 100 minds could conceive. The Cortec chipset and processing unit. The current building block for civilization's most basic needs, and will be the golden gateway into the next level of technology. Cortec was the present and future of technology. Legion was so intelligent that he has been able to branch off of the night skin hive mind consciousness and into his own at will. Legion greets J.O. and informs him of the rallying settlers who are supported by Haven Guard, drastically affecting the odds of total colonization without financial loss. Jeremiah Oliver looks irritated by the news, but then smiles. He was happy to hear about the unification as well and wanted it to succeed, but we have to think responsible growth. I love Aika's last album. It's my jam, but she should stick to music. Have they encroached on our operation zones to the north? Legion informs him no, but they are working their way north and soon will. J.O. shakes his head, then looks at his own advisor and slave, Deftude. J.O. tells him to send the request, and Deftude nods. Thank you, Legion. You are everywhere at once. How can my agents compete for Employee of the Month? J.O. makes a call and gives the green light to initiate the Unity at Last campaign, a full-scale media assault with unprecedented funding that begins to circulate powerful propaganda designed to sway colonists and would-be colonists to buy into his scheme. Jeremiah Oliver reveals to the public that he has the answer to the scarcity of resources, a natural energy that will power mostly any and all of your needs. Haveners from all over the city watch and rejoice. We begin to see a circulation of ads of renowned scientist shills beside Jeremiah explaining how Atlas has found the best way to harvest the energy, but uses overcomplicated terms and hot-button words like safe, efficient, and endless. Jeremiah then drops another bombshell. He announces that the Unity Atlas headquarters will be erected in the center of the ocean and will be a bridge between the eastern continents and the western ones, symbolizing unity. This was incredible news for the people of Haven. Not only would the resource drought end, but there would be a 200% increase in employment with thousands of new jobs for everyone. Jeremiah smiles big, his charisma glimmering through the screen. Project Unity Atlas will be providing housing for all of our employees and supporters in New Nebu. All mortgages and hiring handled by our partners, of course. We cut to the Eastern Dock District, now filled with Haveners and migrants looking to work and help Unity Atlas colonize New Nebu. If not for the housing, it was definitely for the great pay. The contracts were unbelievable. We see Lectern standing on a platform orchestrating the traffic of migrants and Haveners looking for work. You, sir. Yes, you in the red shirt. You have a family, don't you? How would you like to take them where they are clothed and fed? I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss out on that and have them stay in a shithole city like this. Lectern provides contracts for everyone looking for opportunity. Jeremiah folds his arms with a smug look. This is my way of saying thank you to the city I love. I am honored to call Tempest our Haven Lord. The least I could do is raise employment, solve poverty, and build a new world. Suddenly, breaking news interrupts Jeremiah's ad. We get live helicopter footage of Yin and Maxim Nagamato standing on an active viaduct railway. Yin screams outward to the cameras. "We realized the error of our ways. We tried to bring down Atlas and in turn made them stronger." Maxima then begins to speak. "To show our support for Unity Atlas, we will pledge our honor with our blood in hopes to redeem ourselves the true Dorinthian way." Havenites all over the world watch in confusion and awe. Suddenly, Maxima pulls out her katana and beheads her own brother, sending his head twirling into the night sky. She then spins the blade and impales herself just before the viaduct comes and cleans them off in an instant, practically vaporizing everything but the sword. The broadcast abruptly cuts back to Jeremiah, who convincingly pretends to be shocked and speechless. "Oh my. Well, I accept their apology and would surmise that they have indeed redeemed themselves." Jeremiah Oliver invites the people to work for Unity Atlas one last time before the ad ends. A tall Delmon detective dribbles his hazel eyes across the crime scene until they land on the corpse of a dead pervert laying in a trash heap with no pants on. Prostitutes take the wallet and the whole damn pants these days. Samuel Maximus was a freelance detective and is on the cusp of figuring out what's behind these mysterious missing person cases, or at least he thought. Nothing screamed Survey cult about this particular scene. He walks up to it and investigates the surrounding area. At will, he begins to cause the corpse, the trash and debris, even the breeze coming through the alleyway to reverse in time-space, allowing him to view what happened to this victim. It's during this revelation that he witnesses the most bizarre attack he's ever seen. Watching in awe at the uncryptid kill its target, he pauses time and circles around to see the uncryptid up close. He looks at it and its inset black eyes of void. They were empty, but he couldn't help feel that they were conscious of him at this very moment. Sam recalls where he's seen something like this before. Old Raelagarian fables. Beings that were the original old adversaries of Raelagarians that fought over the spiritual planes of the nation before there were nations. It had to be. I mean, the art depicted in Raelagarian murals were dead on like this creature standing before him. Sam notices the creature hears something, causing it to walk off. Likely the music that he hears currently. Sam puts his hat on and heads toward the music to investigate. While exiting the alley, he calls Haven's trash authority to come clean up the trash littering the alleyway. We cut to Min Gray standing in a magical aura created by her performance. Vernali takes a puff of his cig while monitoring the experiment when suddenly one of his occult relics tucked in his belt zaps his waistline, signifying a spike in paranormal energy. Vernali looks around frantically at all the excited and entertained faces enjoying Min's performance. He looks left, then right, then left, then right atop the rooftops of the building but sees nothing. He then spots an incredibly tall figure in the center of the crowd, one that wasn't there a second ago. Too tall to be a normal person, and its clothes from an old age and time. Vernali squints. Who is that? The uncryptid's eyes begin to get big as it prepares to kill a group of people in front of it, but Vernali shouts, "Hey, watch out!" and fires his pistol into the air over the crowd, sending them scurrying. Min Gray stops shredding and Malrose commands his guards to get alert. Vernali runs into the crowd toward the would-be victims while clearing them out. He reaches one of them crawling away from the uncryptid and provides aid by producing a wall of flames that cascade from his fingertips between himself and the victim, shielding him from the uncryptid. Vernali hands the young civilian a necklace of protection and tells him to run toward Malrose, just as the uncryptid comes walking, lumbering through the flames, unaffected by its fire. The civilian screams and warns Renali to watch out from behind when suddenly a pulsating influx of gravity erupts from under the Uncrypted, causing it to be lifted off of its feet, aloof, just as R-Type X comes leaping across with a flying spinning kick, bolstered by gravitational forces, hitting the Uncrypted with a megaton force, causing it to shatter into nothingness. R-Type lands, still alert. He knows that it's not dead. Renali stands up and prepares to run over to R-Type, but R-Type shouts for him not to move. It's quiet, and the two stand still listening for their mysterious guest. Samuel Maximus steps out of the crowd and into the mix with his gun drawn, asking them what all the commotion was about. Renali points at the creature reappearing from behind Sam. That, just before the Uncrypted could kill Sam, a wave of ice-molten eldritch rock comes rumbling through the air, obliterating the physical consistency of the multi-dimensional being, deteriorating it completely. Min Gray stands on top of the teleslab, sweating, but charged and ready to rock if need be, and it would seem it will be needed. The camera pans out, and we see more and more Uncryptids appear in the area, all drawn to the telepathic harmonies of Gruul Saber's cries. R-Type X, Malros, and Renali look all around them. What does this mean? R-Type's sword begins glowing wildly. Renali looks at R-Type, looking at his own sword with surprise. I take it this has never happened before. R-Type says nothing, but pulls his scarf over his face and puts his hand on the blade to keep it under control. Min Gray smiles and begins to crack her knuckles. She was just warming up, and sound check was over. We cut to a lively party happening in the center of the Nebi Haven colony. Migrants, Calidians, and Nebi alike laugh, carry on, and enjoy themselves. We even see John Sage Quill looking laxed and jovial, letting his hair down a bit. We see Morris mingling with everyone. He had a way with words, and thus everyone shared a unique encounter with him. We see Kuth dancing to some old-fashioned flutes and drums by the fire as Louis Left Eye hypes him up, both fairly intoxicated. Nomad watches from afar, painting the festivities. The colonists were happy to be in the company of the Wanderers, and vice versa. It was the Wanderers that made this place safe. Otherwise, they'd all end up like the settlers before them. Aika watches Kuth dance. She was tense, and not sure how to conduct herself, though she couldn't help but clap to Kuth's otherworldly rhythm when suddenly, popping up and startling her, Razul appears from nowhere. Beside him, his strange and silent helper, Azul. Oh, hello, you must be the chef I've been hearing about. Razul looks down at her, unamused by her attempt at playing coy. He knew she knew who he was, and he already knows she has avoided him. Everyone here this night has tasted my cuisine but you. Aika, embarrassed, starts to turn red. Azul lays down an exquisite rug over the tree log for Razul to sit on beside Aika. Razul crosses his legs and stares. Why have you evaded my spoon? Aika didn't know what to say. She secretly loved sweets, but intentionally avoided them, for she hates the metaphysical crisis that occurs when she attempts to determine how her body is actually breaking down the food. It was just an uncomfortable experience that she didn't want to be distracted by at the moment. Aika can't find the words. She blinks rapidly and says, I believe, or I'm not programmed for fine tasting. It would be a waste and a disservice to your talent, your great cooking. Aika could persuade Jacob to drink water, but there were moments when she just couldn't even persuade herself that she was a living synthetic life form. A common existential struggle companion androids experience, though more severe for Aika, as she was constructed to serve as a replacement for the late and great inventor of the same name. Razul scoffs at her excuse, looks at Azul and begins laughing. Azul imitates, but still needed some practice laughing like a normal person. Aika and Razul stare at him for a second. Then Razul looks back to Aika. Aika, do you want to be the only celebrity who has not experienced perfection? Aika thinks. That would be unacceptable. Her career was everything to her. Azul pulls the covering from over a platter and presents it to Aika. Upon the platter lay a hearty meal made from the jungle's greatest, most toxic fauna and flora with a devilish touch. 'Tis a marvelous Maganax bourguignon stewed in heart wine, served alongside of Nebi baby carrots, skull shrooms, and giant's pearl onions. Razul then bows. Azul imitates. A bloody aura emanates from around the dish. Aika takes a fork's pull, chews slowly, then swallows. Something comes over Aika. Razul smiles and his eyes flicker gold for a second. The bourguignon begins to overwhelm her artificial taste buds to an extent never thought possible in an android. It was like seeing color for the first time. It didn't hit like other food. You're beginning to feel it, I can tell. It begins in your stomach, and the power builds till you feel it envelop your whole body. Aika falls backward off of the log, overcome with a sensation she couldn't harness. We get a close-up of Razul Nosferatu's face. This is true enhancement cooking! As he stands over Aika, keeled over in disoriented bliss. She felt the beating of what can only be described as a heart pulsate inside of her mechanical body, but her vitals show nothing abnormal. She felt alive more than ever. Razul helps Aika to her feet and whispers the address to the labyrinth of Pan. He then calls Azul to collect the dishes but finds him nowhere in sight. With newfound spirit, Aika feels more social and more in touch, allowing her to be herself and less worried about failure to achieve. For the rest of the night, Aika spends time living outside of her comfort zone, thinking less about politics and more about being herself. John Sage Quill can be heard giving an uplifting speech about limitations and ends it on a strong note. The only limitations of man are those he seeks to press upon himself and believe to be true. Kuth holds up an ale to that. Nothing is true, only Kuth. John Quill toasts to that. Kuth the truth. Morris stands up and holds his ale up. To Kuth the truth! Everyone stands up and toasts to Kuth, who looks touched by the moment briefly before raising his mug again, then downing the pitcher. Everyone follows suit. We see several night skin replicants of Legion mixed into the crowd, blending in and enjoying their stay. Legion is approached by a tall red-haired woman. Unbeknownst to him, it was Myra. She toasts, Kuth the truth? Legion, none the wiser, plays it off, smiles, and toasts. Shaman Onric watches the camp from afar, up inside his makeshift hut, folding wilderhorn pelts fresh from the hunt. He stops and listens closer to the jungle. He was uneasy. We cut to a man running and tripping over himself, fleeing from a migrant thug threatening to choke him out. He manages to outrun him, but has his legs snapped in half by a pentafang sand snake that captures and constricts him, pulling him down under a patch of quicksand to his demise. His assailant comes to a stop when he loses him, trying to catch his breath. Hands on knees, the thug looks up and notices what seems to be a brothel nestled off into the distance. Odd. That wasn't there yesterday. Or so he thought. As the man approaches the brothel, he notices the temperature gets colder and it begins to drizzle a bit. A trio of raunchy hosts come and greet their guest with aggressive groping and sensual violating while pulling him inside. As the man gets comfortable in his seat, we see the soft hands of Selena Rend adorn his shoulders from behind. The beautiful Selena Rend leans over and whispers into his ear, in turn hypnotizing him with her dominance. Selena fades into nothingness, then reappears on top of his lap in his chair. Let them in, she chants. His eyes are fixated on Selena, infatuated and hypnotized. He confesses his loyalty and opens his heart and soul up to Selena as she pulls an abyssal soul from out of a single gem lodged in her ring and forces it into his vessel. Selena climbs off of him and commands all of her hosts, who are all watching, to do the same for every visitor they get. Selena bestows every host with a soul stone necklace containing an abyssal soul. Service everyone and give my children homes. All of the sexy hosts gyrate and rub themselves in anticipation for some new business. The next morning, we see Louis Lefty slowly waking up from an incredible night. His pet ferret, Loki, runs all around his pillow to expedite the waking up part. Louis walks out onto the hold's deck and gets a spectacular view of his new home and future. He squints his eyes and holds up binoculars at what looks like a gathering taking place in the square. Some more new visitors, it seems. This meant more business for him. His contract with Haven Guard to ship gate guard tech to and fro was lucrative enough, but boy did he make connections last night. Maybe even a little more than that. His contract with Haven Guard to ship gate guard tech to and fro was lucrative enough, but boy did he make some connections last night. Maybe even a little more than that. Louis walks over to his shipment schedule to see how much time he could dedicate to the angelic redheads in town. Louis likes the idea of settling down, but the clouds were his family and the hold brought him to them. We cut to the colony where we see the colonists begin their morning and the hustle and bustle of organized colonization begins. Hail and well met. Kuth is here to help. Kuth grabs a large light post and begins to drag them toward the dock. We see Morris drawing maps and trails using info he gathered from locals. Nomad calculates distances and heights moments after the landmark pins hits the paper. Suddenly, the town comes to a screeching halt and everyone turns to look. Walking slowly through the square of the colony, we see two men in Unity Atlas Corp attire, sleek and sinister. The larger, more muscular gentleman wore an advanced chain-weave vest over top it, and the shorter man stood hooded and caped in leather advisor's gear. His face somber with a neutral grin. Jace Beleren looks around, impressed by the work so far. John Sage Quill stands up and prepares to walk over to greet their guests, but Ica, still emboldened by last night's hearty meal, tells him that she'll handle this. Ica approaches. She was filled with pride and braver than ever. This was her chance to be a leader. Perhaps these were traveling merchants looking to negotiate, or maybe this was that Brazilak person Onric won't stop peeing the bed about. Ica approaches, inexperienced and with over-the-top cartoonish hubris. Hail travelers, Ica states with her hand extended for a shake. Jace Beleren looks around as if amused at the thought of a child being the figurehead of this colony. But he entertains this and shakes her hand. Ica smiled. This was a great start, and she had him where she wanted him. Now for the cute voice, cute eyes, and head cock. Ica attempts to persuade Jace into being truthful about his purpose here. Jace's smile vanishes. This startles Ica. Upon attempting to probe her empty head, finding nothing, he realizes she was merely an android trying to play with his far superior mind. Jace utters, disrespectful, when suddenly his brawny bodyguard Henri Gosling steps across Ica with a heavy metal backhand that wipes her head clear off of her shoulders and sends her flying across the town square. We instantly cut back to John Quill's eyes, his pupils returning from heavy dilation. John places his hand on Ica's shoulder and tells her no, he's got this. John's fractal perspective mutation allowed him to see a few other paths of reality, and none of them ended with Ica being well off. They just ended her, and would likely be the beginning of something terrible, so John Sage Quill takes the lead with what he deemed the best non-violent route in this encounter. John Quill steps forward. Welcome to our colony, travelers. Jace's eyes begin to glow blue. Yes, John. Welcome to our colony. John shakes his hand and shares Haven Guard's vision for a prospering and united Nebi Haven Colony. He then asks Jace who they work for. Jace smiles. Well, John, if you recall, when we first met, I was talking to you about an amazing plan, an idea, the united Nebi Haven Colony, unity between us all, and Atlas. Don't you remember, John? We begin to see Legion's night-skinned population grow as more and more appear mixed into the crowd, as Jace begins to massage the memories of all present about Project Unity Atlas and how excited everyone was for the employment opportunities. We cut back to Louis's ship. Louis grabs his backpack and heads out the door when suddenly he runs directly into what could only be described as a demon from the Dorinthian folklore. A tall and muscular cybernetic assassin with a terrifying cycloptic helmet, brandishing sharp teeth, comes stepping into the doorway unfazed by Louis's inferior body mass colliding into him. Klaus Horan, a 12-class cybernetic corporate assassin employed by Mewis and Steiner, barges into Louis's control bridge. Louis stumbles back as Loki scurries around Klaus's feet, then over to Lefty. Hey, man! Klaus draws out a large handgun and points it at Louis. Whoa, 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 whoa! Through Klaus's visual interface, he sees Louis's entire name, family, credentials, and most importantly, how much money he has made trading while in the Nebi Haven Colonies. Louis puts his hand up and speaks kindly to Klaus, asking that he takes it easy. This must be a misunderstanding. Through the hold's walls and hidden compartments, Klaus can see all of Lefty's smuggled goods he would soon trade. This was all the confirmation Klaus needed. Now it was just time to send a message. We see Louis's eyes glance over at his rifle, the Mark 560. Louis looks back at Klaus. Listen, this situation ain't the best, but maybe, just maybe, we can work together to make it. Klaus fires the graviton beam emitter, firing a beam clear through the center of Louis's chest, followed by an explosion of force created by the beam breaking the sound barrier that sends Louis flying through the hole in the ship created by the beam and plummets to the rocky coastline below. Klaus looks around for the ferret, but finds it not. He then exits Louis's room, shutting the door behind him quietly. We cut to Jace, manipulating the masses by telling them of the perks and benefits of colonizing with Unity Atlas, when he is abruptly interrupted by the large explosion in the distance as everyone turns to look toward Louis's ship. He can be seen twirling in the air, falling lifelessly. The people gasp. Kuth grabs his hammer, but he and everyone soon forgets what they just saw when Jace Beleren directs everyone's attention to his partner, Henri Gosling, who we see standing coastside, facing the water and ships. Henri hunches his back deeply while crossing his arms and grabbing both sides of his alloy mesh vest, which begins to tremble and shake as his fingers dig inside them like clay. Henri then walks a few yards as if weighing 1,000 tons, and then pours out a mass of metal into the center of the settlement. Henri then raises his arms, causing the metal mass to bend and shred itself in order to form into what he desired, a massive metal Atlas symbol that quickly becomes searing to the touch under the hot Nebi sun. This doesn't sit well with Kuth. If there was anything Kuth remembered, it was calling this place home, and that was not a symbol of home. Jace's memory manipulation waves pulsate once more as he begins to speak. Remember this, my dear friends, we all want unity. Help Atlas build a bridge and unite. Kuth suddenly doesn't remember a time when the statue wasn't there. No one did. And no one knows their minds are being messed with. Kuth looks at John Quill, whose memory was hazy as well. He just knew he didn't want this to end violently. And so John speaks on behalf of the entire colony. They will assist in building the Unity Atlas Bridge. However, territory is what they needed to revisit when Shaman Onric was present. Jace prepares to manipulate further when he suddenly hears the words, "That's fine for now," spoken into his earpiece. Jeremiah takes a sip of wine before giving more orders. As long as they're not in the way and are making our bridge, your spies are planted, contracts will be signed, and their money is good here. What more can I ask? Jace Belair nods. Jeremiah disconnects and shifts his attention to his approaching guests walking into his office. We see a small group of ominous mercenaries, all with their identities hidden. Stepping out from between them, we see the large lizard criminal kingpin himself, Dravko Mas. As a precaution, Jeremiah waves his hand, and out from obscurity, we see two familiar masked advisors arrive by Jeremiah's side, Deathtude and the Futurist. Jeremiah Oliver approaches the table with a smug look. Drav takes a long toke of his cigar.
Your friends are quite scary looking. I'll tell you what's scarier though. Being in that jungle out there with me at night.
Drav flicks the remainder of his cigar onto Deathtude's chest. Deathtude tenses up from the disrespect, but knew too well how Jeremiah's command worked and knew not to make Jeremiah angry. Drav laughs.
Your spooky emo princesses are well trained.
He sniffs a few times and glares into Jeremiah's eyes.
You smell familiar.
Jeremiah remembers Dravko Mas quite well and is glad that Drav didn't remember him. J.O. diverts to the matter at hand. Drav snaps his fingers. A merc brings out a small enchanted crate on the table and slides it over to Jerry. J.O. opens it up slowly and is pleased with what he sees. Drav slams it closed.
You're gonna need protection in this scary jungle. Even your protection is gonna need protection. Otherwise, shit's gonna go wrong, and quite often.
Jeremiah didn't take too kindly to the threat, but when doing business with Haven criminals, it was to be expected, of course. Jeremiah considers the holistic approach to his goals and acts on the best interests of his investors. He decides to honor Drav's ultimatum and wires him the bizquirks. Drav keeps his hand on the crate lid.
I also want my own exclusive and secure smuggling route between here and Haven through that new fancy bridge you're building.
Jeremiah hesitates. Drav was very unpredictable, and everything was going way too well to jeopardize it by not giving the lizard what he wanted. J.O. extends his hand. Deal. Dravko hesitates himself, surprised by the swift and confident response. Drav shakes his hand, then pushes it away rudely before turning his back and leaving J.O.'s office. Legion sees him through the door, then closes it. Jeremiah looks down into the crate with a feeling of accomplishment. Legion reports to J.O. that the target smuggler has been neutralized. J.O. smiles. That's good for business. He presses a button, triggering his entire nanite wall curtain to turn clear, revealing a spectacular view of the exotic jungle. It was beautiful. We cut to Haven Guard's Western Ward Barracks. This has become a frequent meeting ground ever since the Haven Gate base became inoperable due to its fried tech. We see Tempest, Jacob, Rokum, Ian, and Professor Syrian Arclight standing around the table, trying to wrap their head around the minister's intel on the missing migrants in the Survey Day activity. 50 migrants have gone missing in the past hour, half of them children. They all can also see the mystery surrounding the vanishing resources and the deteriorating tank shields. Jacob shakes his head. He should have told us. Syrian agrees. He tells them he didn't find out until just a day ago. I was surprised as well. I'll tell you what I told them though. It's almost as if this world was a computer. Tempest turns to Syrian and prepares to share with him what would be considered the highest level of information. Syrian has become a trusted gate scientist and a reliable ally since he arrived. Tempest reveals to him that the world is artificial, a tank. Syrian processes this information quite well. Everything made so much more sense now. Tempest and his allies put their heads together to figure out what to do next, when suddenly, Marshall enters the room. He looks spooked and tells Tempest that someone is here to see him. Tempest adjusts his fedora. Who could this be? We cut to Tempest arriving at the front gate of the barracks. We see Marshall sitting beside someone draped in a heated Mason Mark blanket. For a second, we wondered if it was his daughter. Oblivion's head pokes out and looks toward him. For the first time ever, she felt relieved, as if reaching the light at the end of the tunnel. After all she's been through, she finally reaches people who actually have hearts. A safe haven she has heard about since 12. Tempest couldn't understand what he was looking at. Oblivion was like a walking corpse. She takes a step forward while reaching out to Tempest and immediately faints, falling to the ground, but is caught by Marshall's arm. The camera splits into 3 views. We see Tempest standing bedside by Oblivion as scientists look baffled. We see Jeremiah Oliver looking out into the exotic jungle from his office view. And we see Renali captivated by the glowing sword in R-Type's hands. Ominous glowing weapons and multi-dimensional nemesis. Renali understands this to be a terrible, terrible omen in Raelagarian culture, which likely was bad for everyone. We pan upward and look to a clear night sky. The deteriorating atmosphere flickers. What was going to happen next?
Get your hands off me. Or, the next time I see you, you won't be seeing me, and I will be making a small incision right near the lower third vertebrae of your spine, which will render you paralyzed, unable to feel much of anything from your neck down, and you will collapse in a heap and lie there, heaving for every single breath your lungs refuse to give you. Staring up at the ceiling, you will see me smiling at you, as I will start cutting into you and harvesting your organs. Starting, of course, with the less important ones, because I will want to keep you alive for as long as possible. And so, as you feel your life slowly ebbing away, and you see me work, I will finally rip out your heart, and you will die. So please, take your hands off me.